Okay. This is KAZU, and I want to say again, the views expressed on this show are those of myself, Mae Brussell, and my guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of KAZU's staff or board of directors. I will take maybe one call and maybe two, and then leave the line open. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Mae.
Yeah.
I enjoyed your interview in the Comic News last week.
Oh, I haven't read it yet. Is it good?
It's brief but good. It kind of sums it all up.
Yeah.
They did a good job. I was wondering if you were going to give us your 20 reasons.
Oh, no. Not till October.
Not till October?
No, there may be 25 by then.
You're
20
not gonna...
reasons why I'm shifting gears?
Yeah.
Well, you can guess a few of them, I suppose.
Well...
It's time.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Well, I just started listening to you regularly about 3 months ago, so I'd love you to stay on another 16 years.
I know, but you can start listening to the other ones and read the paper. I mean, it's sad for those who just started listening, and it's a terrible time to make this decision because there are new listeners, but I have to move on.
I guess maybe we'll have to start doing more of it ourselves, huh?
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Thank you very much.
Okay. But you can hear the other one, and I'm going to be on Kazoo for 2 hours. You're not going to be deprived.
Good, and be sure you let us know
You don't have to cry a sad story because these listeners on Kazoo are very special people, and you will get 2 hours just like we do now. It's just the other stations that go out around the country and the other people.
Right.
It's not anything that you're going to be deprived of. You'll get the same amount of time.
Right. What are the numbers of KKUP? Do you know?
Well, I don't have those.
Okay. Well, let us know when and what numbers
well, look
your
up
show's
the phone
going to be on.
directory. It's area code 408. Just call.
Is it going to be the same time?
Yeah.
Wednesdays
Dave's
5
gonna
to
have
6?
one night. I think 9 o'clock. One night he'll have it on there, but you'll still get. You're not going to miss anything if you're a new listener because I'm going to still do the same thing.
But they'll only be repeating the old shows on KKUP, right?
Yeah, but you'll get this. You're hearing this, right?
Right.
Okay, so you're getting 3 hours instead of 2.
All right.
So don't cry.
I'm not crying.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. No crybabies. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae. One question of information and one point of information. Do you have any suggestion how you can get that book, Tennessee Waltz? The library has told me that they can't verify that such a book exists. And they said if I could give them more information, they'd be glad to try to find it.
Okay, I'll put it on the air. What you listeners are going to have to get used to doing is listening with a pencil.
Well, I've done that, but you haven't mentioned...
Mail or getting sheets out, or copying articles.
Is it a new book?
I'll put it on the air, the name and the publisher, and you people will have to write it down fast.
How about the date? Is it a new book or an old one?
It just came out.
Okay.
Do you see Spotlight, that magazine newspaper? Have you ever seen a copy of that? They advertise. I'll put it on. I made a note. I'll put on the address and how to order it.
A point of information, listeners might be interested who are still up at midnight. Larry King is going to have a so-called debate about the Christic Institute on the radio.
Is it at midnight?
KNZSZ or whatever that's called over there.
Everybody's up at midnight.
1560 or whatever that number is.
If you're interested, you stay up till midnight.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, and what was that article he said? What paper had the interview in it?
Oh, the Comic News.
Oh, never heard of it. Okay.
It's out of Santa Cruz.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Hello, the Comic News decided they wanted an interview with me, and so we did that. And I hope you like it. My paper came. I haven't seen the interview. And I'll bring in the address of the publisher of Tennessee Waltz next week. It's filled with a lot of good information. And I think we'll just leave the line open now when Bogarts calls. As I say, he's a very important person in the overall view of how this government works, the mechanics of this government. And I have a lot of material to share with him, but I'll see what he wants to tell you first, and I'll ask him some questions. And I have a report of Lance Trimmer, who was working with the CIA for the Missing in Actions program. I got a videotape. Now, I'll answer the phone, but if it isn't Bo, I'll hang up. So if you're not Bo, turn the light off. Hello? You're on the air.
It's not Bo.
It's not Bo. Let me hang up then and leave the line open, okay?
Real quick. The Pope is not going to beatify Sarah. It was announced this afternoon.
I know. That was in the paper this weekend. I haven't had a chance to. And they said there was a long article in the Chronicle about the crimes he did against the Indians and the genocide. And if you read the article, it said that he came here because, not out of good reasons, but he was leaving Spain because he couldn't get a promotion. Do you know why he couldn't work his way up in the church? Because he was part Jewish.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
So that's
So I guess that we've been able to apply enough heat to the local situation.
Or maybe in the research they found he was part Jewish and couldn't make him a saint.
I suppose. I'd rather think we managed somehow to...
Well, the heat brought out the research, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I called Shaquish, who has a program on Kazoo. She was out of town, to congratulate her. I think it's just one example of what 10 or 15 people with a serious head can do.
Right.
And information is power, and I'm glad you brought it up, because information is power, and my experience has been that these people are paper tigers. They back down.
That's right.
If you have information. If they were confronted with the facts of preparing World War III properly, we could stop it. I firmly believe that.
Oh, good.
But people don't get off their butt enough to know that they have that power. And Chiquishu moved to this area not too long ago and has been very, very active in this story about Father Unipacera and his cruelty to the Indians in this area. We don't have to talk about the whole area where the missions were, but in this particular one. And they quoted a book and researcher in the San Francisco Chronicle yesterday who came upon the brutality and the crimes of him, and I don't think they want any confrontation.
I think you're right.
Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that came up because, again, 1 and 10 or 15 people, I think it was Chiquisha's idea to stop this and got organizations going, and that political activism does indeed pay off, and he's not going to beautify this particular person. The excuse was very slim anyway about a woman who was cured of the sickness sounded really questionable, as if this great feat had been done. As a matter of fact, there was a program this morning on CNN about faith healers, and a person can heal themselves and say it was the Holy Father. Lots of times the power of believing that it was him does it. But there were questionable circumstances and a lot of questions about who he really is. So the final footnote was that he's part Jewish, and that's why he came here in the first place. Is really interesting. And I'm sure a lot of the popes were Jewish, half Jewish, and so forth. And they had women mistresses, abortions, and the underneath St. Peter's in Rome are the babies born and killed of Puritans who weren't supposed to be having sex and didn't have contraceptives in those days, but killed the babies. The catacombs are filled with it. I think we really have to face up to what we human beings do and not put so many people on a pedestal and come to a little closer to the reality. Not everyone's living double lives, but a lot of people we respect are, and that's what gets us in trouble. It's similar to that Kaplan Fund I was talking about, where they're funding all of the left, the NAACP, and I've gone to those organizations and tried to get the local people interested in who killed Martin Luther King and the King Alfred Plan. And the black community in Seaside is totally neutralized and quiet, and their leaders very easily could get seed money originally or foundation money and don't want to shake too many people's systems and stay safe. And then the buckaroos, a little bit or a lot, come in from these foundations, and they don't even realize how complicated that web is of foundations. Now, a little bit more about Bo Gritz. I can tell you some more. I started to tell you about his resume in the military, which is a very, very long matter, and hopefully he'll be calling soon. And if the communications are off or he doesn't call, I'll do the second half of the program taking calls, and we'll see if he taps in, because there's so much on George Bush and the narcotics connections and the Secretary of Defense under Caspar Weinberger with narcotics. I mean, how crazy do we have to be? Martha Mitchell said at the time of Watergate, the mafia's in the White House, and with the thanks for saying that was a needle in her behind and a fatal cancer that wiped her out within 3 years. The women's movement never defended Martha Mitchell. You don't have to be a right-wing or a leftist, but I do think we should rally around these people who tell the truth and help them out. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. This
Hi.
is Bo Great.
Oh, Bo?
Yes.
How are you doing?
Doing fine.
Okay, I did a program with you and Anthony a few weeks ago.
I remember specifically.
Can you talk a little louder?
Oh, I remember specifically. You
Yeah.
were the one who was so well read.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of material that'll fill in. You'll have to come to Carmel. I have a lot of the books, articles, and pieces that while you were away defending our country, I was collecting information on these people.
Well, I could also stop in and see your mayor.
Yes, you worked with him, didn't you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think he's a very fine man.
And with Litton Industry and Ross Perot?
Well,
You know, I have
there's a lot
articles.
of those illuminaries that are becoming more and more illuminated, like WedTech and a few others.
Yeah, wet tech.
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote Clint Eastwood a letter that he didn't answer about 2 months ago. I have a copy of it, and I said, and maybe when I meet you, or I said that your president is very much in trouble. He's in deep trouble, and you have one version of America. Mine may be different than yours, but I love mine as much as you do. And I really would like to see you because I think you could help him get out of this mess. And I have several solutions that I thought he could do that would make him a hero instead of seeing him suffer the way he's doing. And Clint Eastwood never answered. And then last week there was a long article in one of the newspapers, like the San Francisco Examiner, syndicated article, saying what Reagan needed was a friend. And I was going to send the article to Clint Eastwood because he really needed a friend. And Clint goes back to the White House and smiles and sees Nancy and makes the anti-drug picture. Reagan really needed someone honest to come in and just tell him a few facts, and Reagan would pass them on and end these problems.
Well, he probably didn't know who you were, May, and he just thought you were another nut.
Well, I don't
trying
believe
to,
it.
Get in to see a celebrity.
No, I don't believe it because I have lived here 20 years and I've been on the air 16 and a half years. The station was in Carmel. He's a local. He's lived here for years. And the word gets around. A lot of people may say, oh, May is a nut. But as time goes on and more of the pieces become verified by commissions and hearings and inquiry, I know that Clint Eastwood, with a moment's notice, could figure out some of the things Mae Brussell was saying. It'd be worth a phone call, at least, if you like the man.
Well, I tell you what, I know that Clint Eastwood is a good man because I've dealt with a few of the phonies in Hollywood, and if there is a John Wayne alive today, it comes in the form of Clint Eastwood. The reason I say that is because Eastwood was willing to help our prisoners of war, and he wanted nothing in return.
Yeah.
Whereas some of these other people were willing to help, as they called it, but they wanted, like the Russian bear, a whole bunch in return, including movie rights and this kind of right and that kind of right. And I'm not disposed, May, to be a historian. When we do something, what we've done, if it was good, good. We're on to something else. If we made a mistake, then we pick up the pieces and we press on.
Yes.
And so I haven't written books. I haven't made movies, even though a lot of movies have
made
been
about
made
you.
About the POW issue. No one has actually come to me. Clint Eastwood did say, as a matter of fact, there's a book out. My wife saw it in Washington, D.C., that says that Clint Eastwood's next major work will be the life and times of Bo Greitz.
Oh, great.
In his efforts to rescue prisoners of war. I haven't talked to Fritz Manus, who is Clint Eastwood's producer and manager, about that, and it may have been an unofficial biography of Mr. Eastwood.
Uh-huh.
But he told me at the time that he did help us because the CIA was also helping.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, if you haven't dealt with them, you'll find, if you ever do, and any of the listeners, that they never give you enough to do the job. It's usually a very abbreviated budget, no matter what you see or hear on the James Bond movies. And if you want to do the job right, you normally got to go out and find some people that are willing to help. That's what Ollie North did in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
He was banging on doors trying to find people to help what he thought was a good cause, the Contras.
Yeah, well, we talked about, and you knew the estimating group in the Pentagon when I did a radio program with you, that the real goal isn't to do the job, but just to break people up and leave them decimated so they're no threat to you. and to bring in the narcotics traffic for the profits?
I think we have several diverse reasons that we do things, May, and the most heinous of which I have discovered is that there is a group of former government employees who are now in the private sector, who have hooked up with arms dealers, and they are using young people like Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who are still in the government, to further their own selfish aims, and that is trafficking in arms, starting trouble in various parts of the world where arms are needed. And of course, the only medium of exchange for these third world nations is narcotics.
Yes. Yeah.
That involves people like Santos Traficante, which, interestingly enough, a person told me today, and I should have guessed it, that Santos is the family name. Traficante means trafficker.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And so Santos Traficante, while he died, I guess about 2 months ago,
yes,
was most infamous as a mobster and also a part of the Castro CIA assassination attempt.
I know. It was interesting. I thought, I don't know if you chronicled the dates, but when Traficante died, within, say, 5 weeks, there was Edward Lansdale and William Casey and 2 other high people. Barnes. Did you know Barnes of the CIA?
Yes.
Who worked with Gulf and Western. And he all of a sudden, he was a health freak that didn't smoke and ate health food, and his daughter was supplied. He lived in Ireland recently, but he was very big at Madison Square Garden with Michele Zindona and Nixon's outfit and Reagan's. But there were 5 big bosses of the CIA that just expired within about 5 weeks.
Well, May, I wish, and I really do, and excuse my Oklahoma accent, my wife says I should say wish, but
No,
I wish. I wish that if it would take the death of men like that to clean up this country, that would do it. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
No, they're usually dead because they're silenced, not to clean it up.
Well, you know, Nugent and Hand, who ran the bank in Australia, that was just strictly, I mean, it's just absolutely heinous. It strictly was a washing facility for drug money used by the CIA to fund illegal covert operations in Southeast Asia. That thing is just blatant. Even the Australians admit to it now. And unfortunately, we still have that same model in operation all over the world.
I know. Well, you see, the money from Nugent Hand, it was between 500 million and 1 billion. And nobody claimed it, and it went to admirals and generals and Bernie Houghton in Saudi Arabia. So that's where Secord and Hakim and the Iran-Contra gators are setting up their network. And with between 500 million and 1 billion, you just close up the Australian bank, and they were in 16 major cities with admirals and generals. So it's business as usual. They just continue.
Right, and it really is too bad. But unfortunately, while some of the tentacles may be gone, the monster in this story isn't dead. He's alive, I can tell you for sure, and he is very, very threatening. As a matter of fact, it was in 1979 that I was in a 10-story building in the middle of an 18-hole golf course. And as far as I know, there's only one like it in America. It's EDS Corporation, owned by H. Ross Perot.
Uh-huh.
And on the 10th floor, in his office, he has a almost life-size likeness of True Grit.
Oh.
With the marshal riding at full gallop. And above his desk is a sign that says, "Eagles don't flock."
Uh-huh.
And there said H. Ross Perot saying that being very much anti-drug, that we had to take some very drastic measures in America to try to rid ourselves of this drug burden. Now, this was back in '79.
Yeah.
And
what do you think of the rejection of a man, say, like Ross Perot was even, you can't say American 1, 2, 3, or 4 on a scale of 10, but say Eastwood and you fighting for the country all the time, what you believe in, and Ross Perot right up there top with the multinationals. What do you think of the rejection of him by Mr. Armitage and Frank Carlucci, telling him to get lost? They're not interested in the drug traffic.
May, this is the point I was leading to. It just isn't. Now, you got to remember that Carlucci was with the CIA.
Yes.
And, of course, Armitage worked with the CIA under the cover of the Missing in Action Accountability Office in Bangkok, Thailand, during the period that General Kunsa, who's the man I met with in Burma and during the month of May, pointed a finger at and said he is the man that we were dealing in drugs for 1975 through 1979. On the most ridiculous thing is where Perot didn't send a letter or send a messenger or make a call. Here a guy's got $4 billion in his pocket, and he himself, and this really took guts, I think. Perot himself went into the Pentagon, pinned Armitage, and said, I demand that you resign because of your drug trafficking and arms trafficking. You have represented yourself as a man who is accountable for prisoners of war, and yet you have not been doing that. Now, Armitage denied it, but then, May, he took it to George Bush, the vice president. And he took it, it says in Time magazine, May the 4th, page 18, that he even went into the White House carrying a, quote, pile of documents, yet he received no support from the Reagan administration.
Isn't he disappointed like you?
I don't know. A number of people have called me about H. Ross Perot, and I've given his private number out to them so that they could find. I don't know where Perot got his information. This article is dated May the 4th, but it indicates that around the 1st of the year.
Well, yes, I have articles in January of this year where he was going to the Pentagon, one from the San Jose Mercury, January the 12th, 87. Where he was talking about Armitage and drug traffic.
Well, see, that's the very same time that I was in Burma.
I know.
So he was operating off information that was coming from a different sector of the world.
But let me ask you this thing, because this is really, I think I know the solution, but two heads are better than one. Adolfo Calero, of course, has been linked upside and down and backwards with the drug traffic. And he hires a person from the DIA with Oliver North and Mr. Armitage and Ross Perot to go over to the Middle East under the pretext, or maybe it was to get a hostage. So Perot is traveling with Armitage and money. Why would Calero put up money to go to Lebanon when the DEA is paid a salary anyway?
I can't answer it, May. H. Ross Perot would be the man to answer. He's not a man that likes to speak out. He's a man of action.
Yeah.
And, in this case, like I say, he must have found out somehow that proof positive, because Perot is not somebody to do something unless he knows the facts.
See, what I think they were doing over there was, I believe that the big battle in Lebanon between Israel and Syria and Lebanon, and you could back this up or have an opinion, is over the Bekaa Valley where the narcotics traffic supports the weapons for those countries.
May, in every sector of the world, and I can name you about 10 nations where in the last 10 years the United States has been involved, every one of them are drug-producing areas. In every case, we have not gone there and given them the wherewithal to defeat the communists, but we have basically just given them enough to cause a war that requires arms and just enough to get the drug trafficking flowing.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's not just paramilitary people, but it's somebody that's in the money business.
Yeah, well, I believe, my opinion is, and my listeners know it, because I've had it on the air year after year. This is my 16th year on the air, but particularly the last 4 or 5 years, is that I've been putting it on the air, that I pinned these drug traffic operations under the guidance of Henry Kissinger as Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, and Kissinger Associates, that whenever he brings in a confrontation in Southeast Asia, the drugs flowed in. When he was in charge of Middle East, the drugs flow in. When he's down in South America with Klaus Barbie and the Allende overthrow, then between Chile and Colombia, the drugs flow in. And it seems that Henry Kissinger makes the policies that break down the factions in those countries with no solution except drugging America.
Well, I know this, and I think, May, and I'm really happy to talk to you because you are so well-read, and you give me these ideas. I don't know Kissinger personally.
You're lucky.
I do know a lot of the underlings.
Yeah.
And they were not just the little guys like Oliver North. They were high enough to have the president's ear, and I can see what you're saying. Now, for example, Kissinger is the man who basically is responsible, I believe, for giving the death penalty to 308 Americans that were captured by the communist Lao during the Vietnam War. He would not even allow that government, Laos, to sit at the tri-accords, and the Lao told Congressman Dornan. You can get Dornan on the phone and he'll confirm this.
Yeah.
Communist Lao told Dornan, please let us sit and negotiate for the prisoners that we have. We are holding tens of tens. Now, the actual figure, right down to the single man, May, the Lao captured 308 Americans. Not one of them have ever been returned, and this government, under at that time, the guidance of President Nixon and Henry Kissinger, virtually covered over their graves for political and economic expedience because they didn't want to prolong the negotiations, and they didn't want to make the reparations any more than they already were.
No, and all they wanted was the Laotian tribesmen that were into the opium.
Well, and that's true. We used General Vong Pao, the CIA, bought him a barley ranch, and he lives right now very comfortably in Missoula, Montana, on that barley ranch. He also runs a organization called the Lao Development Corporation in Garden Grove that's kind of a mafia-based job placement. Any of the Lao that come to the United States basically must go through the Lao Development Corporation, and they find them jobs, and then of course they have to pay a premium.
Yeah. Well, you see, when you talk about Nugan Bank and the money, and you can go in some more into Theodore Shackley, Kissinger is in the NSC was over at Task Force 157 that operated through Nugan Bank, and George Bush, as CIA director, 1976-77, was part of the Nugan Bank. And then for them worked Edwin Wilson and Theodore Shackley, your friend Shackley that you can describe for the people listening. So Kissinger was part of that whole operation.
Well, I can see what I haven't been able to put together, May, is who the brains are. I know who the muscle.
Someday when we meet, I'll do that with you.
See, the muscle is simple to explain. Current people in the CIA are the muscle. The tendons that cause the muscle to move are people like Ollie North. I think maybe that the head of this thing are people that have been in the government, like you just mentioned a bunch of them. But I never really knew where the nerve center
Well, I've studied for 23 years, and someday I'll sit down and tell you where they are, and I think you'll see the pieces fall into place.
Well, one thing that is most frightening, and that is that George Bush has been a very quiet candidate for the presidency. It appears that Reagan's administration is trying to protect him for some reason.
Well, I'll tell you the reason, and my listeners know this, and you don't know it. I've done quite a few years of broadcasting of George Bush's connections, of course, with Felix Rodriguez. Down in Bolivia, he killed Che Guevara and worked with Klaus Barbie, and Bush's connections and Henry Kissinger, who was in charge of Barbie after World War II, go to the cocaine traffic out of Bolivia. And the Nazi Klaus Barbie, I understand there's pictures of George Bush with Barbie that were taken in San Francisco. So the reason they're sitting on the Bush story is that Gomez-Rodriguez, Max Gomez, Felix Rodriguez, he has two names, wears Klaus Barbie, wears Che Guevara's wristwatch, and he helped with Barbie killing Che Guevara, and Barbie was sending the cocaine to the United States through those channels.
Well, the thing that scares me is I'm a soldier, and fear is something, literally, May, that I haven't experienced in 30 years of operating against the communists. But I tell you, I have more feeling of fear now if George Bush is elected. And I'm a registered Republican. I voted for Reagan twice. I even voted for Nixon. And if there was no other alternative except a person with a bag over their head, I would vote for the unknown candidate before I would vote for George Bush. Because
I guess you've seen Mr. Landcamer's material about George Bush and the secret order.
No, I haven't.
Oh, well, there's a gentleman, I believe, in New Mexico or Arizona who's done extensive work, and he belongs to that very exclusive group in Yale University. William Buckley's a member of the order, and it's like the order of the death's head, like the Waffen SS, and George Bush was supposed to have exhumed. You have to have a skull of a famous person to get initiated, and he dug up Geronimo.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah, you know what has happened? I have heard, I didn't have any idea that the Vice President of the United States was a member of that organization.
They put themselves in coffins naked and go through all kinds of rituals. I think if this Geronimo story were to come out, this may be the factor to stop him from being a presidential candidate. I think he is the worst that there could be for these very sinister reasons.
Well, Yale is a very prestigious Ivy League university, of course. I cannot imagine them
was initiated
of that organization.
No, I know a person. In fact, I got a postcard from him today. He lives in Florida now. He lived in Santa Cruz, and he was initiated into that organization. And they have the skulls of these people down in the basement.
Well, I think from what I heard, and this was, of course, from intelligence work, is that they only choose 15 people a year.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, 15 times 15, 225 members in the last 15 years that are out there somewhere. It is a very covert, a very secret. I mean, we talk about the SDS, and we talk about the Black Panthers and other organizations that are non-American oriented, and the FBI will seek you out like the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're talking about, I had no idea the Vice President was a member of that. That organization probably... Well, you know what's funny? I don't know who's a member of it, but I'll bet you it has some very prestigious people.
Yeah, I'll send you a list of some of the members. But, there's sort of a thrill in collecting these dead people's skulls, just like they dug up the grave of Juan Perón several weeks ago and cut off the hands and want $8 million to give the hands back of the corpse.
Gosh, that sounds like something worse than child's play. I don't know what you would call what they're doing, but it doesn't sound like Ivy League university material to me.
Well,
especially when there's only 15 a year chosen.
Well, maybe we don't know what Ivy League means.
Well, I've got some members of my team that came from Dartmouth, and I know that it's a well-respected university, and they seem to be intelligent people.
Well, you can't have a collective like all the CIA or all the Pentagon or all of Yale. We're talking about a group of people that attend probably Yale and don't even know what's going on.
Well, there's not very many people that seem to know what's going on in the administration. That's for sure.
Yeah. You want to tell about your problems, how you came to surface at this point in time with the realization that this country is in more serious trouble than you realized.
As I said, I've been a soldier for 30 years. I haven't gotten, I vote for the president. I am a registered Republican. Even as a soldier, I feel that a soldier needs to vote for his commander-in-chief so that we can go ahead and complain if we don't like the way he works. But as a soldier, I've kind of stayed away from politics because our of course, challenge is to do or die, not to question why. That used to be it, but I certainly don't do anything anymore of that questioning why. Most recently, however, and the thing that has brought me to your radio program is that we were asked by the White House to go to Burma because a man from Orange County, California had said that the warlord who, according to Mr. Lawn is the director of the Drug Enforcement Administration, that 1,200 tons, if you can imagine. As a matter of fact, they gave a further estimate. It equals $135 billion when sold in New York. This much heroin and opium will come out of the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle is an area about the size of California, and it's located on western Thailand, eastern Burma, southern China, and also western Laos. It is controlled by one man, and his name is Khunsa, Khunsa. No other American, according to Khunsa, had ever been allowed into his inner sanctum. But because we had a letter from the White House, he accepted us, and we were guided 3 days on horseback during the month of November of this past year, 1986. When we arrived at his headquarters, we found that there were no prisoners. But General Khunsa exposed to us something that was just shocking, and I couldn't believe at that time. He said that American officials within the United States government were the biggest customers for his opium and heroin, and that he had tried for 12 years to communicate with the U.S. presidents and during that period of time, and that not one of them would listen to one word he had to say because they did not want the flow of drugs to cease, that they were using these drugs to fund covert activities internationally that Congress would not approve of or appropriate money for. Now, when he said that, I just looked at him. Matter of fact, it's all on videotape, and I've got an address in California where your listeners can get a copy of these.
Okay.
I took these videotapes back because he said he would, if the United States would help him, that he would stop the 900 tons of heroin from coming across the border, and that he would keep any other drug runners from using the Golden Triangle, and he would also divulge the names of all of the U.S. officials involved in heroin trafficking. I was very excited because I know that Vice President Bush was appointed by President Reagan to be the #1 cop to police drugs before they get into the U.S. We delivered this videotape just before Christmas to the White House. I expected a very excited, let's go get 'em. Instead, I got a no interest. When I got this no interest, May, I said, wait a minute, the Vice President, isn't he the #1 policeman? And I got a bow. There's no interest here. Now, that told me that something was very, very wrong. I went back to Burma and spent the next 3 months in collecting the information that the President had no interest in. I returned in May of 1987 with all of the names on videotape, read from the logs, with 25 witnesses who had actually done the dealing over the past 20 years. We presented this before the Narcotics Control Task Force of the House of Representatives on the 30th of June of this year. And you know what we got?
You got arrested.
We got, well, affirmative.
That's
we
what you got.
No interest. Now,
No, yeah.
here's the amazing thing. Here's the thing that every American that's within earshot should be doing more than just talking about. They ought to be furious. They ought to be calling Clint Eastwood. They ought to be writing their Congress representative. Here we've got 900 tons of heroin and opium that will come into the free world this year. We've got Nancy Reagan saying, say no to drugs.
Yeah.
We've got the White House saying no to getting rid of the drugs. And we've got the Narcotics Task Force under Lawrence Smith from Dade County, Florida, saying no to an investigation of the drugs. To me, it doesn't make sense. This is not the way that Thomas Jefferson or any of the other leaders of this country, who were divinely inspired, I believe, set this country up to be.
Yeah. Well, the British Empire, if you read the politics of heroin in Southeast Asia, the way the British Empire made all of their huge profits and control of the masses was spreading opium around.
Well, they were the beginners, and I'll tell you what, I hope that we get out of the business, because we have certainly taken the baton from the British Empire, because there's no question, May, it's not just Southeast Asia. It is Latin America.
Yeah.
It is Afghanistan.
Because they learned from the British Empire the method of control of the masses, and also the profit to buy more guns.
Well, Thomas Jefferson set this thing up so that the masses would control the government. That's his definition, and I like it. That's why we have checks and balances. That's why we have the system we have. Can I read something that Theodore Roosevelt said very quickly?
Sure, sure.
This comes from a man who is my hero. The reason he's my hero is because he was a doer. He wasn't such a great talker. We had a missing American, and a man by the name of Razuli, who was a sheik, an Arab sheik, had captured this man. I think actually it was North Africa.
Yeah.
And Theodore Roosevelt sent an admiral with a note, and it asked for this naturalized American back or Razuli dead. And by golly, Theodore Roosevelt got that naturalized Polish American back. Now, here's what Theodore Roosevelt had to say. I wonder if it would apply today. Patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the president or any other public official, save exactly to the degree in which he himself stands by the country. It is patriotic to support him insofar as he efficiently serves the country. It is unpatriotic not to oppose him to the exact extent that by inefficiency or otherwise he fails in his duty to stand by the country. In either event, it is unpatriotic not to tell the truth, whether about the president or anyone else. Now, what would you do, Mae, if a drug dealer were selling drugs? I wonder what your listeners would do, and they caught a drug dealer in their house selling drugs to their children.
Well, these days, I don't know.
Well,
I know what my listeners would do, but today there are people even turning their own children on to drugs. We're in such a complex world of economic deprivation that when your factories are sent overseas and your corporations are merging and dropping you just before your pension is due, and the factories are closing, the steel and the shoes and everything's coming in from Korea and Taiwan, people today have no economic way where we could be producing these things at home. They're reduced and forced to be in the drugs just to get the next day's meal.
Well, Mae, I was on, I forget the channel number. Anyways, People Are Talking out of San Francisco.
Oh, yes.
And that was on, I believe, Friday.
Uh-huh.
My heart soared like an eagle. When I landed my plane at San Carlos, and we were driving from San Carlos into San Francisco going north on Highway 101.
Yes.
As we enter the city, the highway made a 90-degree bend, and right there, staring us in the face, was a 5-story building. The entire side of the building was painted with a prisoner of war logo that says, "You are not forgotten."
Yes.
Now, to me, that shows that amongst all of the weirdos you're talking about, there's a whole bunch of good people buried under them.
Oh, I know they're there. And the thing is to tap them. The trick is to tap them before they get pushed against the wall and have no out. There has to be a collective consciousness. Remember when Martha Mitchell, at the time of the Watergate, when the men were caught and she was out at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and she called Helen Thomas and said, "The mafia's in the White House." And the thanks she got was a needle in her behind by Steve King, who got promoted to the head of the agricultural department, and with 3 years she was dead. And she risked her life to tell us, what was happening. And when you say 12 years ago you tried to figure these things out, I don't doubt that good people are out there. They are out there. But the power control group can do in the wife of the Attorney General. Look what they can do to us.
Well, Mae, what's really scary is that this is my true belief. I raise my hand to the square and swear before God. I'm fearful that if Vice President Bush is elected president, that the likes of Mr. Carlucci, who is a member of the same club, that Mr. Schultz, who's a member of the same club, that Mr. Armitage, who has definitely been using the missing in action office, the accountability of our MIAs as a center for working the drugs for illicit covert operations that our congressional system would not approve of, and probably rightfully so, that if they get in power, and again, I'm a Republican, it is going to be the scariest time that this nation will face since World War II.
Well, don't you think when the president was in trouble, and he appointed Frank Carlucci to solve the problem with this great national acclaim. Now, I know you're close to Eric von Marburg or worked with him in your operations, but Carlucci worked with him and von Marburg, being a business partner with Theodore Shackley and Thomas Kleins and Frank Derpel and that whole group. Didn't that tell us right then, you're right to be fearful? Didn't it tell you when Frank Carlucci took over that it was worse than business as usual, things would be worse?
No kidding, Mae, and that's what's afraid, because it's not the president, I don't think, that's making these decisions.
Well, this is
think
why I wanted to get to him through Clint Eastwood.
Well, I think that the president is probably here we see the youngest president we ever had was shot and killed in Dallas, Texas.
Whose brother wanted to break up the syndicate. That's
Yep,
right.
And he didn't make it either.
No, he didn't. And also his brother had sent Carlos Marcello out of the country. He was after Santos Traficanta. I wonder what kind of a world it would be if he had broken up the Meyer, Lansky, Traficanta, Carlos Marcello, Sam Giancana group.
Well, we'd be much more of a nation under God than we are today. I have that feeling.
Don't you think that was a good reason to get rid of him? Look how much profit they made out of Southeast Asia with the drugs when he was wiped out.
Well, like Mr. Lawn said, who is our narcotics chief, $135 billion this year, and honestly, we have no interest from the White House and no interest from Mr. Lawrence Smith, who runs the Narcotics Task Force of Florida.
Well, you know, the letter that I wrote to Eastwood, I'll share with you. I don't think I've put that on the air. But what I wanted to say to him, and maybe you come to Carmel and we go see him, but by then our president may be dead if we share it, but I'm going to say it. If he would have a press conference, and not that cockamamie he's going to pull Wednesday night, but one that would put his face on Mount Rushmore, if he said, look, you know, I have been a captive, if he ever had a microphone without those speechwriters, the President of the United States is a prisoner in the Oval Office. He's been that way since John Kennedy's head was blown off. The connections of those people are recognizable. They're in power today. I will open up the National Archives, not keep anything locked up 75 or 50 years. Those people are linked to international drug traffic and death squads, and I want to be remembered as the man who broke this mystique and mystery over so that you could get back to living like you did before.
He'd be a modern-day Elliot Ness.
Don't you think that, and he knows the people like Edgar Eugene Bradley and Patrick Foley, who hired Ed Butler, his own sponsors, if he just got to a microphone and for 20 minutes said, you know, the archives are locked up, the rule is only man-made, so you can man-open it, and say, I'm going to lay it all out, and before I die, I want this country to stop being torn apart.
Well, Clint Eastwood, I know, is a good man. I believe that, and I agree with you. I've watched him talk, privately. He's not the most articulate man in the world, but it doesn't mean he doesn't think deeply. I think that he is a man who is capable, because he does have a John Wayne image.
And he has the affection of the president and his wife.
The president, but Reagan, of course, only got 7 months left, to do whatever he's going to do, and basically, it's already a lame duck.
Well, he has more than that, but why not go out being remembered for something? Because that same drug cartel is going to break him apart, taking away the wings on a fly.
Well, and it's not going to go away, May, unless somebody with some clout. Now, H. Ross Perot has clout.
That's
he has
right.
$4 billion, but now we've seen that money cannot buy its way to get his foot in the White House to get rid of some of these people.
But truth has a more interesting route than money.
Well, a man like Clint Eastwood has a name.
Yes.
America puts more stock in credibility of name than it does in dollars.
See, what I wanted him to do, I'll write the speech, and he should go give it to the man and set up and call a national press conference that, for all purposes, is going to be another one of these cover story, tongue-in-cheek, anecdote type of operations. And once he gets at the microphone, make history and end all this trouble and pain that's been caused by drugging the whole world.
Well, I hope that he would do it. The best way the reason he won't do it, May, is because he's not educated. And unfortunately, television is not the way to become educated. It needs to be radio, because you have the time to flesh these issues out. And people can listen until they finally see what the truth is.
But just the declaration of policy. Now, we have about 9 or 8 more minutes. Do you want to talk some more about, first of all, where can people, I do have your tape, and I watched it this weekend, and it's wonderful, that tape of you in Burma. It's so interesting how Kun Sa sends all his narcotics over and lives so simply. Is that a revelation to you, the way he lives?
Well, when I first went in there, I thought he might be some kind of a Star Wars monster, that it was covered with young virgins and, would lap up millions of dollars and lived in the Taj Mahal. But the fact is that the guy sleeps on a bamboo bed, just like we slept on. He lives in a thatched house like we lived in while we were there. And most of the money that he makes goes into arming and equipping his army. As a matter of fact, all of his arms are American.
He practically, in terms of material possessions, it reminds me of Khomeini, who sits on the floor and had no guards after the Shah's intricate security system. But this man doesn't even, the overhang is just raw wood. It was just an amazing structure.
Well, and he doesn't seem to need security, because the thing is that the Thais and the Burmese are so corrupt that they go to him and seek his counsel rather than going there to destroy him. As a matter of fact, that's how the road got built, and your listeners haven't heard that, but what happened when I went there in November, we rode 3 days on a horse. When I went back the second trip, we drove in a pickup truck in 12 hours, the 75 kilometers to his headquarters. Now, the road was built by the Thais using our tax dollars. It is literally a heroin highway. I talked about 4 nights ago to Mr. David Wesley. He is the number 2 man in the Drug Enforcement Administration. Now, up until this point, Mae, the Thais and everybody else had been denying the road. As a matter of fact, Lawrence Smith denied it. They were going to request the CIA do some overflights. But David Wesley said, yes, Bo, we know about the road. He said it wasn't really constructed for heroin traffic. He said that General Kun Sa had a graduation at his headquarters, and he didn't want the VIPs that he invited to the graduation to have to ride for 3 days on horseback, so he asked the Thais to build this road so they could drive to the graduation at his headquarters. Now, give me a break. That road is the 8th modern miracle of the world. It was built through the most steep, rugged, virgin teak mountains I have ever seen. It's beautiful country. But I remarked to Scott Weekly, as I was going there with him, that I would hate to be the engineer that was required to build a road, and yet when I went back there, the road was built. And on the road were 10-ton trucks that carried official Thai military SEALs that I'm sure were also carrying drugs. And yet Mr. David Wesley will say, well, that was a graduation road. It wasn't built just for drug trafficking.
Oh, no.
Now, give me a break. He's using, because I'll tell you, a 10-ton truck goes a lot faster and a lot easier and carries a lot more than a mule.
Now, Theodore Shagley, who worked with the narcotics traffic, he's one of the defendants in the Christic Institute suit.
I had heard that, and before I didn't know who the Christics were, and I still don't really know their background, but I do know this. They are pointing the same finger at the same people for the same thing, only from a different part of the world.
But it's a Catholic organization, and it's run by Father Davis and Daniel Sheehan. He represented Karen Silkwood in the fight against Kerr McGee.
I had heard that from Oklahoma, yes.
Yeah, you're from Oklahoma,
I'm an Okie, so I'm familiar with the Kerr McGees.
Well, it takes a lot of power for one person to take on Kerr McGee.
Well, and it's going to take even more power, because obviously we've got, just look at some of the people here. We've got H. Ross Perot, we've got the Christic Institute, even Ed Wilson, who was a CIA agent put in jail for running drugs in the Time magazine, June 15th. He's pointing the same finger at the very same people.
Yes.
He says in that magazine, it is to this bunch of sharks that Ollie North has tied himself, which he's showing that people like North are being used by these people. And it says, if I'm guilty, they're guilty. If I got 52 years for what I shipped, they ought to get 300 years.
Yeah. Now, are you in trouble? Are they trying to? You mentioned that the training of the Afghanistan freedom fighters in Nevada through that operation. That possibly Albert Hakim wants the drug profit out of Afghanistan is offing framing you for charges. Is he pushing you out?
What's happened is this, Mae. When we turned the tape over, and then they knew that I had gone back. They leveled a charge that said, we are going to charge you with misuse of passport. What's funny about it, of course, is that Jane Fonda was cavorting with the enemy during the Vietnam War, that McFarland and Oliver North were using Irish passports. Nobody said anything about them.
Yeah.
When I came back and refused to cooperate, and because I had a good job for me in Washington, D.C., and they told me, Bo, you've got to erase and forget, because you're going to, quote, hurt the government.
Uh-huh.
At any rate, when I refused to cooperate, and even in front of my lawyer, they told me, you need personal security for your family.
Uh-huh.
But if you point one finger at any of these people, then you will take away that option. Well, the fact is that the security of America, May, is worth far more than my own personal security and the financial security of my family. I don't need a job that bad.
Do you think that that's one reason that Ollie North wanted security for his family? It had nothing to do with Abu Nidal, but with the people he was working with?
Well, if you look at Arnold, now Arnold took over the drug trafficking. He was a CIA man from Mr. Armitage, and Arnold died very mysteriously about 3 years ago.
In his sleep, right?
Well, somebody gave him a Mickey Finn,
Yeah.
and then blew out the pilot light in his heater, and he asphyxiated. Now,
Oh, I see.
For a CIA chief to do that is a little strange.
Yeah.
I think
Let me
it was
ask you
because
the-
Mr. Arnold knew too much.
Our time is just about running out. Now, let me have the address or the cost where people could get that very interesting videotape of you telling your story and what you're trying to do. Where would they write to?
All right, here it is. It's the American Information Network. That's easy to remember. American Information Network, number 2140 West Chapman, and then it's Suite 223 in Orange, California, 92668. And I think the cost is $695, which is the cost of the tape and what.
How
it
much?
took to do.
Just $695?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 36 or 46.
No. I don't think there's no profit to be made.
Oh, I
We're
see.
just trying to show people what
Yeah.
the Congress has before them, and yet is turning their head away from.
Yeah, well, listen, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you for calling. I really do appreciate it, and I'll keep up with what you're doing and where you are. I heard you on KGO.
Okay.
And we'll follow the case, and thanks a lot for sharing your experiences, and I hope you have some good luck out
God
of
bless
this.
all of you, and I hope your listeners will spend 22 cents on America, write Clint Eastwood, write their congressman, get them to do something.
We'll do that. Thanks a lot. That's Bo Grice telling us his experiences calling from Nevada. This is Mae Brussell, the conclusion of World Watchers. I'll be back with you next week, and maybe we'll do some more discussion, take calls at that time about this very important subject.